to this new episode of The Voices of Boost, the podcast series where we talk about big ideas, bold moves, and groundbreaking technologies within the energy and utilities industry. My name is Michel Delvaux, and today I will be talking to Jens from UMANIQ about responsible AI. But Jens, before we start off, maybe you can introduce yourself and your role within the company UMANIQ, so
Sure.
the audience know who you are.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Jens Meijen. I'm an AI governance, risk and compliance consultant, which is a really long title, but I'm also a managing partner at UMANIQ. What does all of that mean? Well, we basically help companies use AI in a responsible way and in a way that's compliant with relevant regulations. And next to that, I have a PhD from the University of Leuven. I worked in quite a few different countries at Stanford University, for example, as a Fulbright fellow. So I lived in Silicon Valley for a while. I saw a ton of startups using AI, developing AI. So I really went towards the heart, I'd say, of the AI industry. And that really showed me, gave me a glimpse of the future of AI as well.
So you've been to the heart where it all happened.
Yeah, the place to be.
Yeah, indeed. A dream of a lot of people, I think.
Of course.
Now, you've also spoken about a responsible AI could be a launchpad for success or innovation. How do you see that actually in practice?
Well, first of all, I think responsible AI is a really misunderstood term. A lot of people think it's just about saying no to all kinds of things. Oh, we're not going to use that data because it's unsafe or something, right? And that people get scared. It's basically a term that people use when they're scared of doing something wrong. But in essence, it's about saying yes to the right things, to things that are actually worth your time, worth your investment, to things that actually align with your business objectives and your business values. And when it comes to that launchpad, that's actually a reference to all of these LinkedIn posts that you see with these little rockets, right? These little rocket emojis that announce some kind of launch of a new project or a new product. And essentially what we're saying is, without a launchpad, these rockets can't fly. So that's why responsible AI and AI governance, risk and compliance, which is kind of a part of that. That's why we see that as a framework for enabling innovation, for enabling AI projects, essentially. It's rules and procedures that really help you formalize things, help you do things faster, more safely, and more consistently as well. And in the long run, actually making those things explicit and clear can really serve as a launchpad, because you don't have to start from scratch for every project. You can simply adapt the existing framework, the existing launchpad for a new little rocket, right?
Yeah, deploying it in a smarter way and being compliant with certain rules, I guess. But
of course,
compliance sometimes sounds a bit boring. But how can it actually boost innovation and trust in the technology?
Well, let me counter that with a question. What happens if customers don't trust your product? What happens?
Yeah, they don't use it.
They don't use it, exactly. Yeah. So you need that trust, and compliance is one way to ensure that trust, right? And especially now with the EU AI Act, which a lot of people seem to misunderstand. People think it's like GDPR or something, which is, it's totally, completely different. The EU AI Act is essentially quality management. That's one of the main parts of that regulation. It's quality management, and it's a seal of approval for a high quality product. So that means if you follow the EU AI Act, or you're compliant, right? People will know, okay, this product works, it's verified, it can be trusted, essentially, right? So your data is safe, it won't do any weird stuff, unexpected stuff, for the most part. So especially if you're in a high risk situation or in a high risk context as an organization, you're going to need that trust, right? Because otherwise people will simply not use your product. And I think that's one of the main ways in which compliance can stimulate innovation.
And like in these rapidly emerging technologies, how do you make sure that governance and rules don't slow down things, but speed them up? Well,
I think there's a range of possible responses here, but I think some of the main things that we see currently in practice, right? Because I'm just speaking from experience, business continuity is a pretty big one, because a major part of AI governance, risk and compliance is documenting the things that you're doing, documenting the way you're developing systems, for example, right? If you're a developer. And well, if someone leaves your organization, especially with a very niche technology like AI, with very sought after expertise, this happens quite a bit, that people basically get hired away from a company. Well, they take that expertise with them and take that knowledge with them. And so that's an issue in terms of business continuity, right? Your system might need to get updated, but no one knows how. And every update basically breaks it. So then you're stuck with a useless system. But if you have proper documentation protocols, that kind of stuff doesn't happen. So essentially, you're saving a lot of time on tons of things, like digging through really unstructured documentation. If your documentation is properly structured as well, that helps a lot as well. There's risk management that can be a lot more proactive. For example, instead of constantly putting out little fires, you can actually monitor and then intervene before things become an issue. So it can, over time, it can save you a lot of money.
All right, and you briefly touched upon this earlier, but in your view, what do you think about and this is a tongue twister for me, the EU AI Act? Do you see that as a blocker or more like an opportunity, really?
Well, I see it as an opportunity also because I really, I see the practical side of this regulation. People see regulation and they think, oh no, rules. Oh no. People have a real aversion for rules currently. And I think that's also in part because software development specifically never really had to cope with that many rules. So, I mean, GDPR was already a big crisis for a lot of people. Now the EU AI Act, people are scared. And I kind of get that. But, in reality, it simply tells you, okay, these are the best practices in AI development, and you have to follow these. Even in the US, when I was working with startups and venture capital firms on the EU AI Act, I used to basically explain, okay, these are the rules you'll have to follow. And everyone would say, oh no, we hate rules. We don't want to follow these rules. It's so burdensome. But then when I didn't mention it was a regulation and I said, hey, I have this AI governance framework. Look at this. What do you think? Everyone would say, oh yeah, these are best practices in the industry. So you can even just knowing that it's regulation will make people kind of hesitant to embrace that. But the AI Act really simply is a good idea from many different perspectives, including a market perspective, because now you have the same rules across the entire EU. Obviously, that's going to help disseminate AI systems across the European continent.
All right. And how can actually building all that knowledge improve innovation in companies? Because it's not all about technology, like you mentioned, it's also about using it in a sane way. So that's why these regulations are in place, or these best practices. But how can actually building knowledge around AI within companies help moving that innovation forward?
Well, I think AI literacy, which is currently the term that is used for that AI knowledge, I guess, even in the AI Act, it's called AI literacy, Article 4. I think that's a really important driver of innovation and uptake, right? Because again, we can go back to that question of trust and of user uptake, right? If no one uses your system, it's useless, right? And so people have to know, okay, what is AI? What are the risks associated with it as well? And in knowing that, you'll be able to use it more safely. How do you actually interpret AI outputs? That kind of stuff is really important for people to trust these systems and actually use them. And also, it kind of goes back to the name of my company, UMANIQ. I mean, we try to emphasize that human aspect as well. AI implementation is about so much more than technology. It's also about change management, about helping people get over that resistance against against having to embrace a new way of working, because that's essentially what AI does to you, right? It basically changes the process that you go through every day. And that's the second aspect of AI literacy. It's not just about, using AI safely. That's of course important, but also if everyone knows how AI works and what it can do, and even the people who are essentially doing very everyday work, like day-to-day work at a very basic level, well, these people can also see, okay, maybe I can use AI for this. Maybe I'll send, I'll write up something, a little idea, and then I'll send that to someone who can maybe develop that, right, to the IT team or whatever, right? So you can kind of broaden the innovation that you can access in your organization. If people know how AI works, then you can automate the processes that are boring or time-consuming.
There's indeed logic in that, and I think you and your company offer a lot of tools or ways to get companies moving. And I've read something about an AI Act readiness and risk assessment. How does that actually work, and how can that help companies moving forward?
Well, the major problem with the AI Act currently is that it's really misunderstood. People don't really, it's a pretty complex regulation, I'll admit that, definitely. It's product safety legislation, which is also kind of in its own niche as well. So people are kind of in the dark about what it actually is. So that's why we have this assessment where we look at, okay, so first of all, we explain what this regulation is, because there's so many misunderstandings on the regulation itself. We then study the AI systems in the organization. So essentially, what are you doing with AI? Is it considered a high-risk use case under the AI Act, for example? And then we look at what are the obligations under the AI Act, and then how ready are you to actually comply with these obligations? For example, if you don't have any documentation processes for your developers, well, obviously you're not going to be ready, because a major part of the AI Act is documenting what you're doing. So that's how we kind of look at that in these different steps to see, okay, what are you doing? Are you compliant, or in what ways are you non-compliant, and how can you fix that? Because that's always something that we add in our assessments. We give really actionable advice, not legal mumbo jumbo, but stuff that developers themselves can also use to actually take that next step towards compliance.
Okay, so there's also a big human factor involved in using AI. Obviously, that's what I hear when I hear you speaking about that. But how do you keep like the human oversight and transparency in AI systems while still wanting to push innovation forward?
Well, I think those are not mutually exclusive, right? So you can definitely have human oversight and transparency and still be really innovative. For example, when it comes to human oversight, even in the AI Act, it says, well, you can kind of determine for yourself what is the appropriate level of human oversight as a developer, right? So as a provider under the AI Act. So you can basically decide, okay, we have a very risky system with real risk of harm to human lives, for example. Well, obviously, you're going to need pretty direct oversight. But for other systems, that's not really necessary. Right, so there's a lot of different ways in which you can apply human oversight in practice. It's not someone looking at every output of a chatbot, right? That's not going to be realistic or feasible or even necessary. And then when it comes to transparency, I think there's a lot of confusion on transparency as well, because people think, okay, we have to basically explain our entire system and say everything, but that's also not useful and not necessary, because specific stakeholders have different needs. Right, so people who are affected by your system, but who are absolutely not technical experts, I mean, it makes no sense to give them all of the information. They don't know what extreme gradient boosting means, right? So it makes no sense. So you have to kind of tailor the information that you give to your stakeholders. And that's the only way that you're going to achieve any form of meaningful transparency. And meaningful transparency basically means that people have enough information to make informed decisions on, okay, I want to work or use this product, I want to work with this company, that kind of stuff, right? So that's kind of the end goal, that people make better decisions due to that transparency. So, and same thing for human oversight. The idea is not to have a human look at everything a system is doing if that's not necessary. The idea is to ensure safety. And once you have that safety, that's the level of human oversight you need.
Yeah. So the important parts, really.
Yeah, it has to be practical.
Yeah, indeed. Is there any example to make this a bit more concrete? Is there any example you could share where responsible AI has actually made a difference or a breakthrough?
Yeah, well, when I was in the US, I worked with a startup that had a really, really good product. I can't really go into the details on that, but I mean, it worked perfectly, essentially, because these are all, Stanford graduates, pretty smart people, essentially. And they had a really good product. It worked perfectly well, but then, their go-to-market was basically, not very good. They were pretty good at sales, but they really weren't emphasizing how their product was essentially safer and more accurate than everyone else's. So I basically said, okay, guys, what if you actually standardized all of these processes that you currently have, and you basically become more transparent on the things that you're doing, and you show, hey, we're doing this responsibly. And that really gave them an edge over competing products. And I think that's also where responsible AI, as well as AI governance, risk, and compliance, will be going in the future as a seal of approval for a good product. That will give you an edge over other providers. That will actually, I think, make the market a lot healthier, because currently we're also seeing quite a few products that are not developed responsibly, that are basically designed to just hog data and to hoover up data from everyone as much as possible. So I think that's really the way that we're supposed to be going as well.
Yeah, so you touch upon the future. So where does actually UMANIQ see the future of responsible AI go to from here in, let's say, 3 to 5 years? So in the more or less near future, what is actually your vision on that? That's I think a good conclusion to your story. So interested to hear what the idea is there.
Well, I think it's simply going to become a requirement, just like we currently have, in some cases, sustainability requirements or cybersecurity requirements, where organizations say, hey, we're only going to work with you and your product if you have the proper cybersecurity measures in place. And I think responsible AI, or AI governance, risk, and compliance, which I kind of see as a part of responsible AI more broadly, I think that's going to become an essential aspect of simply working with specific AI providers. I think there's no way around that, because we're currently seeing more and more people getting worried about AI as well, especially in high-risk contexts, in contexts where there's legal effects as well, where people, for example, get refused childcare benefits by AI, for example. And in those situations, you really need to be transparent. You need to have human oversight. You need responsible AI. So I think in the future, this is absolutely going to be essential for the success of any AI company or any company using AI.
Yeah. That's clear, I think. And to close off, do you have any advice for companies or people who are looking at these kind of technologies and don't really know where to start or where to look at?
Well, I'd say start with the basics. So, for example, an AI policy is something that you absolutely need. And I sometimes get the reply, well, a policy, it's kind of, it's just a document, right? But you really need to activate that policy and make sure that people get their fingerprints on that, right? So you have to talk to people in the organization and ensure that they can give their input on how they think AI should be used and how AI is actually used in the organization. It shouldn't be dead letter, So people should get their fingerprints on it. You should do training sessions on that AI policy. Okay, what are the actual rules, right? What are the rules we're supposed to follow? What data can be put into an AI chatbot, for example? Those are really the basic rules that you have to have in place. And then AI literacy training is pretty obvious. I mean, the obligation under the AI Act to provide these training sessions it essentially went into force the 2nd of February of this year already. So there are tons of companies that are non-compliant. Obviously, that's not going to be enforced just yet, but still, it is a pretty major oversight in many organizations. So I'd say start with an AI policy and with AI literacy training, and that's basically those are your building blocks for AI governance, risk, and compliance, and responsible AI.
All right. Thank you, Jens, for this interesting conversation. I think there will be hours more that we could talk about AI and responsible AI. But for now, we need to close off. But I really do like to thank you for your visit in the studio and your input on this topic.
Thank you for having me.
So to the viewers and listeners on the other side, I would like to thank you for your interest and for tuning in again. And if you want to know more, see more opportunities, or learn about challenges within the energy and utility space, then be sure to tune in next time. Bye.